Where are you?
Top of the morning to you, Hugh. I'm in Washington, D.C.
You're not wearing any green.
I know, I need to rectify that.
Well, you got green in the picture behind you, but honestly, you're named Gallagher.
I know, I was a little bit rushed, Hugh. I went for a run this morning, and you'll never guess who I saw.
Tom
It was
Cotton out
Chad
walking the
Henne.
dog?
No, it's
Who?
Chad Henne. Chad Henne, he ran 13 yards and nobody touched him.
Okay. Did you see Corey Lindsey? Because he ran away from Green Bay to San Diego. Did you see that? Because that guy,
Didn't see him.
he played 70% of the snaps for Green Bay and he left, and they lost a fourth round draft choice. You know why? They don't do anything on the fourth round, much less fourth down. There you go. Here we go.
There it is.
All right, there it is. Boom. Congressman, I want to talk about this meeting in Anchorage. There's a meeting in Anchorage between Tony Blinken and Secretary Austin, the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, with a couple of people from the People's Republic of China. Why is it in Anchorage? What are they talking about? What worries you?
Well, Anchorage is an appropriately frosty venue for the conversation, I would say. I think the important thing to realize about this meeting, well, the most important thing for the administration to keep in mind is to maintain the hard line. I know that sounds simple, but sending a message that this administration is prepared to continue the intense and strong competition with the Chinese Communist Party that the previous administration initiated, and that it won't be fooled into a more cooperative relationship, or what the Chinese refer to as a win-win relationship, is the most important signal to send to their Chinese counterparts. Towards that end, the fact that that former Secretary of State John Kerry is not going is actually an encouraging sign to me, because it tells me that this will not be a discussion about climate change. Instead, it could be a discussion about the fact that the CCP needs to stop its theft of our intellectual property, particularly in key technological areas like AI, microelectronics, batteries, and hypersonics. The other thing I'd note, it was great to see the administration talk to our allies first. They met with the Quad prior to meeting with China. I thought that sent a particularly important signal. And Kurt Campbell, the top Asia official on the NSC, just said that China needs to end its economic pressure on Australia, a member of the Quad and one of our closest partners, before we can even think about improving relationships. And so the final thing I'd say, Hugh, is we may see a small deal emerge from this, which you could imagine the administration brokering some deal that brings what are called the two mics, two Canadians that are held in Chinese jail, in return for Meng Wanzhou, the chief financial officer in Huawei, who's in Canada right now. But I wouldn't expect some grand, strategic deal. And in fact, China is claiming this as a strategic level dialogue, but we are not affirming that idea, which means we're essentially downgrading its importance. So hard line, hard line, hard line is what I hope the administration will communicate to their counterparts.
There's one part of my bingo card you didn't hit, Congressman, which is the nation state of Taiwan. And I know we have a one China, two governments policy, but Politico ran an article yesterday that is nothing short of alarming. It quotes unnamed senior defense officials suggesting that the PRC is getting ready to invade Taiwan on an accelerated timeline. And it did not indicate that the United States would come to the defense of Taiwan. Now, I sat down with Mike Pompeo in his first interview when he was CIA director, and then in an early interview when he was Secretary of State. I asked him both times, what about Taiwan? And he said, without hesitation, we will live up to our treaty agreements, which include defense of the island. Is the Biden administration telegraphing early and often that the PRC may not use force against Taiwan without the United States intervening?
Well, Admiral Davidson, our head military official in Indo-PACOM, the commander of Indo-PACOM, testified before Congress last week, and in public testimony before the Senate, prior to him coming to the Armed Services Committee in the House, he said that he believes that the CCP might make a move on Taiwan within 6 years. 6 years, Hugh. So we now have a high-level military official publicly affirming that sense within the administration and within the intelligence community that this could be something that happens within the decade. The Chinese refer to this decade as a period of strategic opportunity. And no doubt, Hugh, I think they feel emboldened, remarkably, after a year in which they unleashed coronavirus on the world. they still feel like they have an opportunity to press the limit and that they're not going to experience pushback from the West. I have not yet seen the forceful defense of Taiwan from this administration that I think we need. But more than anything else, beyond statements reaffirming our commitment to Taiwan, both from Congress and the administration, we need to work to put in place the defense systems and equipment throughout the first island chain and in Taiwan that deter the Chinese Communist Party by denial. In other words, that make it clear that even if they tried to make a move on Taiwan, that they would fail, that the cost would be so severe that they shouldn't even think about that. And right now, we do not have that defense architecture in place, in large part because we haven't fielded the missile systems that are necessary to make that possible. So I'm hoping more than anything else, the Defense Department, which currently seems to be wasting a lot of time fighting some weird culture war or mean tweeting against Tucker Carlson, will focus on fielding a posture of deterrence by denial in the first island chain that makes it impossible for Xi to effectuate unification of Taiwan with the mainland by force.
Now, Congressman Gallagher, let's assume for a moment that General Secretary Xi, who is going to be General Secretary for as long as he's alive unless there's a coup, has put at the top of his list as the accomplishment that he wants in history that he reunified China and he got Taiwan back, and that he intends to take the island one way or the other within 6 to 10 years, whether by armed invasion or by economic coercion or a combination thereof. What will the United States do? What do you want them to do if he initiates hostilities as Mao did over the Straits of Formosa with artillery in the 50s? What do you want the United States to do at that moment?
I think it's absolutely essential that we send an unequivocal signal that we, in concert with our allies, will not allow that to happen, and that Congress step up to the table. And I'm not saying we need to authorize proactively an AUMF in order to defend Taiwan, but we should be prepared to rally the American people to that effort, if indeed it comes to that, because my own view really is twofold. One, I think you're right to suggest that this is Xi's legacy issue. This is how he will go down in the history books, and he communicates this openly. It's not like he's hiding it. It is something he communicates repeatedly and openly. And two, that Taiwan is really the new Berlin, that it occupies such a position of importance that if we were to allow Xi to invade Taiwan with minimal or token resistance from the West, all of American credibility on the world stage would completely collapse. And I think we have a lot of work to do, Hugh, in terms of convincing the American public about the strategic importance of Taiwan, so that if the worst case scenario unfolds, we will be able to stand together as a country in defense of the West, in defense of Western civilization, because that's really what we're talking about here, Hugh. And I think there's an economic component of this too that we haven't yet explained. Taiwan is, of course, the global hub of semiconductor manufacturing. Semiconductors are essential for everything on the low end, whether it's electric vehicles, or on the high end, whether it's fancy military equipment. And the fact is, by taking over Taiwan, Xi could hold the rest of the world hostage by assuming control of TSMC, the world's largest semiconductor manufacturer. There's also a related question, Hugh, of how we bring some of that semiconductor manufacturing back here to the United States. I'm co-chairing a task force on the Armed Services Committee on supply chain vulnerability. We had our first hearing last week with Democrat and Republican former defense officials. And more than anything else, we heard about the critical importance of semiconductors, of chips going forward for the United States. So we're going to have to invest some money in order to have that domestic production capability, because it is very expensive, which leads me to another tragedy, Hugh. The fact is we just spent $2 trillion bailing out profligate, progressive states, wiping out San Francisco's debts, paying federal employees not to work if the teachers union have shut down the school district where their kids go to school. And we couldn't even carve out $20 to $30 billion for a domestic semiconductor chip fabrication site in the United States. It's like we spent all of our money on everything except for the things we need in order to survive in this geopolitical competition with China. It's maddening, Hugh. And now we're about to waste $4 trillion on an infrastructure bill that I guarantee you will not prioritize the Defense Department. And I guarantee you, Hugh, the Democrats are going to come to us in a few months and say, you know what? We don't have enough money. We need to cut the top line of the defense budget because we just don't have enough money. Are you
You
kidding
know,
me?
if any state governor is listening with a Republican legislature, they will take the money that is coming from Washington D.C. and they will build that semiconductor plant. They will build a semiconductor campus to rival any campus in the world, and they will build a shipyard, Mike. They will build what the federal government has refused to build in an inversion of roles. The federal government will pay for the states, but the states can build. Have you talked to anybody in Wisconsin about doubling the size of your shipyard up there in your district, or about putting a semiconductor plant there? Because they're getting enough money to do that.
Well, we need to build dry docks here domestically where we repair our ships. We build those dry docks, guess where? In China, Hugh. I mean, it's madness. And then we cut them into three pieces and we have to ship them back across the Pacific Ocean. So, yes, I think particularly for Midwestern states, we have a huge opportunity right now. There's been some debate right now about the fallow Foxconn facility in Wisconsin and whether that could be repurposed into a semiconductor hub. It is my belief, Hugh, that with the right combination of state tax incentives, federal investment, and will on the part of state and federal officials, we could bring that manufacturing to the industrial Midwest. And it's absolutely essential for our national security. We are going to need some flexibility, however, on environmental regulations, because this can be a dirty enterprise. So we do have to figure this out so that we're doing right by the environment without getting mired in endless environmental lawsuits and things like that.
Well, I hope every governor is listening. I want to close Mike Gallagher again by talking about Corey Linsley. The Packers lose their center every 3 years. I mean, we got J.C. Tretter from the Packers, a great center. Now you've lost Corey Linsley. Why don't centers want to play with Aaron Rodgers?
Well, Aaron Rodgers is so good, he really doesn't need protection. But, just to close out, we have no time to waste when it comes to semiconductors. We cannot be slow like the Browns defense chasing after old man Henney on 3rd and 15.
You know, you can't hurt me on this stuff. You can't hurt me because we just signed John Johnson, the best safety in the draft and free agency. We are going to the Super Bowl. I hope the ancient Packers make their way there so we can crush them and put this to end forever. Congressman Gallagher, talk to you next week. Thank you as always. It's always China time with Mike Gallagher, and I like that. It's also Relief Factor time. Hey, my new affiliates.